Okay, so before play begins Thursday night, let's just make sure that we crossed all the boxes off surrounding everything SEC heading into the brand new season. Conference predictions, check that box. SEC championship game prediction, check that box. College football player predictions, check that box. SEC storylines going into 2024, check that box. Quarterback rankings, check that box. Quarterback tiers, check that box. Questions we have going into the regular season, check that box. Top 10 games of 2024, check that box. We really covered a lot on this offseason, didn't we? What else am I missing? Oh, wait. We have not done superlatives going into 2024. So Elite College Football decided to take a turn where they gave out superlatives surrounding all FBS teams going into 2024. And I figured, let's just put a spin on it and make it SEC related going into the brand new season. So what's going on, SEC Unfiltered? It's Cole Thompson here. Make sure that you like the video, hit the ring notification down below, and of course hit subscribe because you've been with us throughout the entire offseason. This is now your home for all things SEC. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the social media channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We're everywhere these days at SEC Unfiltered. If you want to follow me, keep up with everything that I got going on, it's at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter, Cole_Thompson on Instagram. And to check out all of our great work, make sure that you visit SECUnfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by Rhoback. Use promo code SECU for 20% off all joggers, polos, hoodies, shorts, much, much more. Look good, feel good this upcoming fall on game days with Rhoback, promo code SECU. So we have a ton of superlatives I want to give out going into this year. Some are simply going to be players, some are going to be teams, and I don't want to waste your time. Let's dive right on into it. The best team heading into 2024. I think you and I can go ahead and lay down our arms, regardless of what fan base we represent, and say that right now, Georgia is the betting favorite. And there's a reason why. You would have an easier time finding a piece of hay in a giant needle stack than finding a flaw with this team. You've never seen a program fall forward. And what's really interesting is that this is a team that lost a ton of talent, proven talent, really quality players, top to bottom, and no questions whatsoever. Yet you're not worried about them. And that's always been the case for Georgia, but primarily on offense. Carson Beck may be the best quarterback in the country going into this year, over a 72% completion rating last season, had a high touchdown to interception ratio. And now you get another season in the same system with Mike Bobo. So what does that say? Only progression, not regression. Yeah, you lost a lot of talent. And I'm going to make this abundantly clear. I have never used this word with a tight end, but incredible and irreplaceable is a way that you would describe Brock Bowers. That is a 1 in a million time tight end in the history of college football. But when you land a Kirkland Brand Yerasek in the transfer portal, plus what you have still with Oscar Delp and Dylan Bell at the position, you feel pretty good. You feel pretty good at the wide receiver position. And even though Latin McConkey is gone, well, you didn't really lose much else. You still have proven names that have been in the building, like a Dominic Lovett. You also bring in guys like Colby Young and London Humphreys, who in years past would probably say, let me go be the starting material leading man for another team. Nope, they want to go down to Athens and be a part of a winning formula as a supporting cast member. Your running back room got better. You easily might have got the best transfer on the market in Trevor Etienne. Plus, you already have 2 good running backs behind him that can easily find their way into the end zone. And people always say, Cole, why don't you ever talk about their defense? Why do you never talk about Georgia's defense? Well, the main reason why is because of why would I have to? You and I both know that we're seeing the same language be spoken by Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart. It's like an alien dialect. And then you hear Kirby go, and it's like a cover 0 blitz. And you already know that they're going to be in the backfield feasting on quarterbacks. This upcoming season, nobody's going to doubt if they deserve their spot in the college football playoff. If they make it to Atlanta, the only question that you have with their schedule, games against Texas, games against Alabama on the road, games against Ole Miss, premier teams, Clemson in week 1. Well, do we give them the number 1 seed, the number 5 seed, or are they just going to have to pick it to the playoff by traveling on the road? No questions asked that right now this is the best team. Now, who's the worst team? Vanderbilt, I hate doing this to you. I feel for you. I really do. And I don't mean to put you under the bus because you want to know what? The one thing I will say is that when you look at a team like Vanderbilt, they have the ideal start to any program, quarterback play. And one of the biggest blessings that you could ever have is when your quarterback and your offense coordinator are speaking the same dialect from the get-go. Diego Pavia does not have to learn anything new about Tim Beck's unit because of he kind of already knows it since he played at New Mexico State last year, where he led the Aggies to a conference title game. And also, here's the problem that I always have with people putting Diego Pavia as the number 16 quarterback in their rankings. He plays for Vanderbilt. Well, you do realize that last year, New Mexico State decided to march on into Jordan-Hare Stadium, one of the most hostile environments in all of college football, for my money, and absolutely put on a showcase and beat Auburn by double-digit points. But my favorite thing that I hear is that people will go out and say, well, Cole, Auburn lost to New Mexico State. I try to defend Auburn all the time on this stance and say they were looking ahead to the Iron Bowl because if they know that the voodoo magic that seeps in the soil in those rivalry games would be potent and promising, that they really weren't paying attention to the Aggies. And then they say, well, Cole, they lost to New Mexico State. So you see how your argument's already flawed when you try to bring up Diego Pavia as the 16th ranked quarterback. He hasn't played quality SEC competition. So playing in an environment like Jordan-Hare Stadium is not quality enough for you. But here's the big problem. The only thing I'm talking about right now whenever it comes to the Nashville franchise is Diego Pavia. That is the one promising spotlight going into this year. You lost both of your star receivers to Colorado and Georgia. You also lost your third receiver to Boston College. You have questions at the running back position. You have questions at offensive tackle. You have questions on defensive line. You have questions outside of really everywhere but safety and maybe linebacker. I feel for Clark Lee. I think that this could be a team that's better on paper than what they were last year, and you are seeing that promising moves made in the right direction. The problem is that you still have games ahead with other opponents who are much more, I think, capable of winning college football games this upcoming year. Best offense. There's a lot of ways I can go with this one. By the season's end, if you told me that LSU had the number one offense in the country, I would not be shocked. The same thing goes for, I think, a place like Texas. I would say Georgia belongs on that list. If you told me Tennessee with Nico Iamaleava was going to have the number one passing attack, it wouldn't shock me. But I don't know if those are going to be things that I can bet on. What I can bet on is I am going to see it down in Oxford, and that's why Ole Miss is my pick going into the year. Jaxson Dart, Trey Harris, Jordan Watkins, Caden Prieskorn, all back for the last dance. If you haven't seen the documentary, go ahead. It's on Netflix. It's a great show talking about the final season of the Chicago Bulls, headlined by Michael Jordan. They're all here for one final season. They realized that last year going 11-2 was just a little bit too much to go ahead and turn the corner. And who knows, maybe in a world where NIL isn't a big thing, you won't see Jaxson Dart return to Oxford for one more season. But NIL is a big thing. And the best part is that they have the players. They also got better with the names added in the portal. You go ahead and you land a superstar wide receiver in Juice Wells. That's now your number 3. So immediate upgrade from what you had last year in Dayton Wade. Yes, you did lose Quinshon Judkins. Nobody's going to take that away from you. But you know what's interesting is that Jaxson Dart, I think, is ready to take on that next role as the architect of this offense. And he still has a really good running back. I think Ulysses Bentley can be somewhat special. We are not talking about him in the same light that we probably should. They also brought in a ton of transfers. So what you lost in quality at the running back position, you gained in quantity. And sometimes when you have that, it's enough to recoup the benefits. This is still going to be, I think, a very balanced attack team that can go toe-to-toe with anybody, mostly because they have the offensive line to do so. And for Lane Kiffin, there's not much more to teach Jaxson Dart. Excuse me for getting a little bit nerdy for a second, but much like when we talk about the Jedi Order, when you see the Padawan go into the trials and you hear Obi-Wan Kenobi talk to Anakin Skywalker, I have nothing left to teach you. That's kind of where you are in this relationship, this dynamic between Lane Kiffin and Jaxson Dart. At this point, you're expecting them to just take that next step. You're expecting a guy like Dart to finally master the offense, master what you have in terms of the passing attack. More importantly, probably go ahead and over-exceed expectations, put yourself in a prime position to immediately flourish and be that team to beat in the SEC. Best defense, again, many a team I think could fall in this category. Don't sleep on Kentucky. Their big blue wall up front is going to be monstrous. But you and I both know what the right answer is going into the year. It's Georgia. Michael Williams, Warren Brinson, Chaz Chambliss, CJ Allen, Samuel Mondon, all that talent for the front seven. And Glenn Schuman's just coaching them all up. He has on the same wavelength. Everybody is speaking the same language going into this season. Everybody knows their assignments and nobody feels out of place. It's like overnight you watch as Georgia loses talent to the transfer portal, loses talent to the NFL draft. Yet, lo and behold, here they are once again, ready to go week one. It's very similar to what we saw with Alabama. Funny how back in the day when Nick Saban would do that, it's like a disciple decided to take that same formula and implant it down at Sanford Stadium. Not going to go ahead and make a joke on that one. You can probably take that for yourself. The beauty about Kirby Smart is he has his team prepared because it's not just what he brings in with the recruits. People always want to focus in on the recruits, and there's a big reason why. But what it really comes down to are the coaches. You can lose a name every single offseason, and it doesn't feel like you're replacing much. It feels like actually you're upgrading. Fran Brown leaves in the overnight to go head up to the Northeast, Syracuse's next head coach. And what do? You go ahead and maybe upgrading your defensive back room. How do you feel about losing Del McGee? Well, you still feel positive about the direction of your team. And just like we saw with Dan Lanning a few years ago when he decided to hightail it up to Eugene, Oregon, there waiting in the wings was the next successor. So the thing about Georgia is even though you have new players, young players, KJ Bolden, perfect example. I don't know if he's going to make an impact week one, but I can tell you what, by the season's end, he is going to be one of the best freshmen that we see playing on the secondary at any single position in college football. They already know their assignments, and they're caught up to speed by the time September rolls around. They don't miss. It's why every single year you see them rank in the top 10 in almost every single metric. Tackles for losses, sacks, pressure rate, third down conversions, red zone efficiency. They are always one of the best because they have a certain standard. And it starts at the top with the head snake. And if you don't see any trickling down, the reason why is because of everyone has expectations. Overrated. I got a surprise for you, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think that there is an overrated team in the SEC. When you go through and look top to bottom at every roster, truly, just be a neutral fan. It's very hard. I can understand that. But when you do this for a living, you kind of have a good basis. Everyone kind of fits in the order of what you expect. You expect there to be about 7 or 8 teams competing for a college football playoff and probably 10 wins. You know who you are. You have about 5 to 6 teams that are probably competing for 8 to 9 wins. You got probably about 4 to 5 teams competing for 7 to 8 wins. So if you overexceed expectations, that's actually where the conversation begins. But overrated, the only way that I think that you would have an overrated team would be if somebody doesn't live up to expectations. And so if we go with disappointment, well, I think the easy predicament would be Ole Miss. And the reason I say Ole Miss is because if you look at their schedule, nobody in the SEC has a cakewalk cupcake schedule. It just doesn't happen. Even Vanderbilt, if they were to play the most downtrodden teams in a season, would still have struggles. If you were an Auburn roster and played the schedule of like a Missouri, it would be still rigorous. But the problem is that because of what the expectations are in Oxford, on the Grove, at the Vaught, what if you end up losing? What if a game to, say, Kentucky or South Carolina, because if you were looking too far ahead of that LSU matchup, where really the tests start to pick up, you end up dropping the game. And then you lose in Baton Rouge, and then unfortunately now you're playing with your backs against the wall because you have to win out to make the college football playoff. And that includes games against Oklahoma, and that includes games against Georgia, and that includes games against Mississippi State, the Egg Bowl, where you don't know what to expect because if it's a rivalry weekend. I'm just saying, there is no overrated team, but there could be a disappointing team. How about underrated team? Why not Kentucky? Let me ask you guys something. How many times are we going to fall into the trap? I am a believer in history, and I know that history can find a way to repeat itself. And every 3 years, it just feels like the Bluegrass State has something in the water system that allows them to overexceed the expectations from the year before. Underwhelming, 10-win season. No idea how they do it, but the same formula has worked every single time. New quarterback, new offensive coordinator, same head coach. Well, this past offseason, they brought in a new quarterback, and the guy ended up playing at Georgia for the last 3 years and was pretty dang good to push Carson Beck. That's Brock Vandagriff. Brand new offensive coordinator. It was first Liam Cohen, and now it's Bush Hamdan. And so Hamdan is coming on over from a team that last year fired their head coach, yet still found a way to win the Mountain West title. And his quarterback was so good that Bobby Petrino thought he should be the next starter up in Fayetteville. And you still have Mark Stoops at the helm. Guys, I'm not going to go ahead and fall for the trap. If the offensive line is good with what they have with Gerald Mincey coming on in, with what they have with several returnees, with what you have with the wide receiver core, the running back room, you got better on the defensive line. Your secondary was pitiful last year, but you upgraded. You brought in the safety and the defensive back from Michigan. You also still have Hairston back there. There's a lot to like about Big Blue Nation, and their schedule is manageable. Don't look now, but this is a team that could easily find their way to another 10-win season. And if they get 10 wins, are we going to say that Kentucky doesn't belong in the college football playoff? I'm not putting them at 10 wins. Don't go ahead and quote me now. What I am saying is it's going to be hard-pressed to go ahead and convince me after what I've seen and how history has worked. We're going to go in a different pathway. How about Offensive Player of the Year? Actually, let me phrase that. How about a biggest surprise? We are not talking about them in the positive light, but the only thing that we are complaining about is Oklahoma's offensive line. I know we're hearing about Jaxson Arnold. I know what we're hearing about some of the offensive play calling. I know we're hearing about the turnovers in practice. But you know what the beauty is? When game days roll around, practice is just practice. Think of the words out of Allen Iverson's mouth. We ain't talking about a game. We're talking about practice. We're talking about practice. So what if practice version of Jaxson Arnold ends up not showing up on Saturdays? And you still have Nick Anderson, you still have Angelo Anthony, you still have Deion Burks, you still have quality tight end play, and your offensive line is giving you protection, ample time to throw the football down the field. Oh, and you still have that defense, the one that wasn't good enough for anybody in the Big 12 or is very much going to have their meat shown to them, and they're not going to be great in the SEC. Even though Dominic Williams and all Big 12 defensive linemen said, hey, you know what? I actually want to go here, not LSU. I want to go to Norman, not Baton Rouge. So what about that? Are we really going to sleep on this team and say that they're not going to be one of the best in the SEC if they get their offensive line together? And if their schedule says anything, we'll know pretty quickly if they can hold their own. Bill Beatonbus got a quick test ahead of him. Tennessee in week 4, Auburn in week 5, a bye week, and then Red River. In those 3 games, you will know what to expect from this offense moving forward. And if you see them actually put together quality play, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you were just the problem. You weren't seeing what many others were seeing surrounding a program like the Oklahoma Sooners going into the year. Biggest disappointment? I don't know if I'm alone on this take. And you know what? If I'm banned and I'm pig roasted from this city, so be it. I'm fine with it. But I just don't believe in Arkansas this year. I'm sorry. I know there are so many people that are probably going to be in the comment section already screaming, if you show your face up at Razorback Stadium, we are pig roasting you. We are burning you at the stake. I get it. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to pick against Arkansas. I want to see the Razorbacks actually turn the corner. But they're the one team I have too many questions with. Yes, I know what the schedule says. And I also know that last season, they were down to the wire in so many one-possession games. And it feels like the way that they have home matchups, it could bode well in their favor for the massive wins. The ones that we talk about on Sunday morning where I get to have egg on my face, put on the clown makeup, and look like a moron on this channel when we do the live shows. I get it. But with all of that situations where they can win the game, they also can get blown out by double digits. They also could be shown the door before the start of the third quarter. You could start seeing fans flock to the exits and start heading into Bar Central to drink their sorrows away at their favorite watering hole before we even get to the fourth. That's just the case for Arkansas. I like where Arkansas is going. I think that this is a great program that can turn the corner if they bring in another head coach in the offseason. I like Pittman. I really do. I think he is one of the best overall personalities that you have in this sport. But it's hard for me to say that you are not going to be baking bits going into the year. Now let's talk about player of the year. You know what's really interesting? Nobody ever talks about these type of guys. And the reason why is because they're not the ones scoring touchdowns. They're not the ones throwing it 50 yards and making it look like an easy breeze. They're not the ones that are scoring in the backfield on pick sixes or getting sacks and terrorizing quarterbacks. But your offensive line is what makes or breaks you. And the best player in college football resides in the SEC, and he plays down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I am such a proponent of Will Campbell being known as the heir apparent of Tyrann Mathieu, of Grant Delpit, of all the other players that have donned the historic number, that I am not afraid to say I would sign that petition and start every single way possible. Go down into the state of Louisiana and force the NCAA to allow him to wear number 7. Because when I look at what is the standard of Tiger football, it resides at your left tackle. That's a guy that immediately said, I want to be a Tiger. No, I don't really care if it's Ed Orgeron. I don't really care if they bring in Lincoln Riley. I'm not sure if Brian Kelly's the right guy. He may be out of the door in about 3 months. But I want to be a Tiger. And I'm committed to being a Tiger. And you know what's really interesting? You won't see him score any touchdowns this year, but you'll sure as hell make sure that he is not letting Garrett Nussmeier be sacked. You'll sure as hell watch him be the reason why Nuss is able to throw it 50 yards down the field for an easy 6 points. You'll sure as hell know that this is a reason why LSU was going to be late in games and probably have a shot to go to the college football playoff. Because of what you have on that blind side, if you're starting an NFL franchise tomorrow and you look top to bottom all across the SEC, are you really going with another player? I don't think so. You want the mean and green Bayou Bengal himself, the voodoo shaman man that I call Will Campbell. That, my friends, is the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft for my money, and well, it should be for yours. Offensive player of the year. I have a rule. It's very simple. If you're going to set a record going into the season, I believe that automatically you are the best player in the conference. I think that this year, Luther Burden is going to break the Mizzou record for the most receiving yards in a single season. He almost did it last year. 1,212 yards, over 9 touchdowns, 14.2 yards per play. He needed literally 50 more yards to rank number 2 in front of Jeremy Maclin. Denario Alexander holds the record for 2009 at 1,781. I think this is going to be one of the most potent passing attacks in college football. Brady Cook back for another year. Kirby Moore in the same system. You can't double team number 3 because you got number 1 on the other side of Theo Wees. You got Mookie Cooper. You got Brett Norfleet. You got a great running back tandem in the backfield that can make plays in space. So you are going to have to win one-on-one matchups with Luther Burden. I'm going to tell you what, hate to break it to you, it's not going to happen very often. In fact, you are going to lose more battles than you're going to win. He makes 50-50 balls look more so like 90-10. Best of luck. Close your eyes. Hopefully you come away with a pick because it's a batted ball in the air and you just go ahead and call it a day. That's what you get when you face off against Luther Burden, and I don't see anybody surpassing him. So I think he ends up breaking a school record this year. I think he's the best wide receiver in college football. He's an All-American. He's a superstar. This is somebody who I think is going to be talked about in that Biletnikoff, that easily dark horse Heisman Trophy race, kind of like we saw back in 2020. And so if you're in that conversation, you're the offensive player of the year. Defensive player of the year. We all have that one friend. You know who I'm talking about. The guy that is just great at everything. First time doing something. Like never played basketball before, and he's draining threes from downtown like it's no one's business. He steps onto a baseball field, and it's a softball game, and the first pitch takes it 470 feet, center field, dead shot. Your center fielder's looking back going, what the hell did I do wrong? Well, Nick Scourton at Texas A&M has never played defensive end. He was an outside linebacker at Bryan High School just outside of College Station. When he got to Purdue, he was an outside linebacker playing from a standing 2 technique. And he led the Big Ten in sacks last year and was top 3 in tackles for losses. And he comes on into Kyle Field, the place that he was literally right next to growing up. And Mike Elko says, you're going to play defensive end. And in his first game, in the spring game, nearly has 3.5 sacks, multiple tackles for losses. They had to slow him down and say, listen, don't hurt our quarterback. We need him healthy for this season. Just tap him on the shoulder and call it a day. And now he's had an entire offseason to go ahead and work that in. Well, hate to break it to you, that's defensive player of the year material. That is somebody who I think can come on in, lead the conference in tackles for losses, lead the conference in sacks, lead the conference in pressure rates. That's an All-American in the making. That is a first-round pick in the making. And you've given him now months to master the craft underneath what I would consider to be the czar of defensive line in the SEC. You got to remember, back in the day when he was the defensive coordinator underneath Jimbo Fisher, Mike Elko was producing NFL material left and right in the trenches. And he has not had a talent like this when he was at Durham. He has not had a talent like this. There's probably not been a talent like this walking into Kyle Field since the days of Myles Garrett. And if you have that on your side, that is a defensive player in the making. I hate to break it to you. Underrated player of the year. How about Trey Wilson? I was very much subordinately upset that we did not see his name mentioned enough on all of the all SEC rankings at the start of the year. It actually hurt my feelings that this was a kid that last season showed you a little bit of potential, that pizzazz a bit. And nobody kind of gave him his credit. Okay. Well, I can tell you what, on Saturday afternoon, when they play against Miami, you want to talk about a kid that is going to be the X factor and the reason why the Gators walk away with the dub. It's number 3. And he's going to do that consistently against teams like Texas A&M, against LSU, against Tennessee, against Kentucky. When you talk about Trey Wilson, Eugene Wilson, for those of you that want to see it on the depth chart, there have been comparisons to what Percy Harvin did back in the day underneath Urban Meyer. That is disrespectful. There are certain players that we just don't compare. Like when we say KJ Jefferson has similar traits to Cam Newton, you throw in Kirkland brand because of it's not the same as the best product. It's not like a Pepsi. It's not like a Coke, but you'll drink it. You'll enjoy it. It's definitely got the same flavor or aura, and you're okay with it. Well, that's what you can expect from Trey Wilson. Kirkland brand Percy Harvin. Can easily take slant patterns, can easily take motions, can easily take jet sweeps, can take reverses, can line up in the backfield, can do a little bit of everything. He is a Swiss Army knife and a chaos prism of every single play that you can imagine. This is going to be a player that we talk about at the season's end going, hey, why wasn't he on any single all SEC ranking? You want to know why? Because of people were just not paying attention to what you saw down in Gainesville. How about transfer of the year? This one's a very easy one for me. I have said since the offseason, there has not been a better fit for the 40 acres than what you're getting in Silas Bolden. Because if you're going to trust your offense to do a little bit of everything, have play after play, movement after movement, just find a way to get speed in the open field, you're going to trust Steve Sarkisian with a guy like the Oregon State transfer. 5'8", reminds me a little bit of Keelan Robinson, but also Xavier Worthy. Can win as a running back in jet sweep motions, can easily go ahead and take those quick passes and turn it upfield for gains of 18, 22 yards. Pretty good route tree overall. And so many people are talking about what Isaiah Bond brings to this offense. Isaiah Bond comes on in from Alabama. 4th and 31 is now going to be the number 1 target for Quinn Ewers. And here I've been all offseason telling you, okay, that's fine. I know that it is easy, in sight, in mind, out of sight, out of conversation. And we didn't get to see Silas Bolden because he was still in Corvallis this past spring. But if you start watching how he's looked through the early stages of camp, if you start looking how he's performed during fall practice, this is going to be the number 1 receiver. I'm telling you right now, go run to Vegas. Don't sit here and listen to the rest of the show. Sprint to Las Vegas and make sure that you put money down on Silas Bolden being the number 1 target for the Longhorns in 2024. That's a reason why Quinn Ewers might be making it to New York City. Isaiah Bond is playing second fiddle to what I believe in Silas Bolden. How about we go freshman of the year? Again, another easy pattern. So back in 2012, there was a wide receiver that showed up at the University of Alabama in the Yellowhammer State and immediately just took names, kicked asses, and proved to everybody, I am better than advertised. Everyone inside that locker room, there were veterans, seniors, who had to say, yep, you were the number 1. I have not seen a player carry that much of a pedigree on campus as a freshman like Amari Cooper did, the way I've seen Cam Coleman down in Auburn, Alabama. That is somebody who immediately showed up in spring practice, took one look around the room and said, I'm the alpha, and everyone just kind of smiled, nodded. The wide receivers coach even looked at him and go, yes, sir, and he's not even truly 19. That is a difference maker. That is somebody that when you feel like you are underneath pressure, when everything is about ready to just collapse on you, and you hear Joe Burrow scream, screw it, Jamar Chase is somewhere down there and just throw it deep, that's Cam Coleman. He has great route running. He has great tracking skills, smooth, silky hands, and the crazy part is we're going to watch this weekend against Alabama A&M. Him not have the biggest performance. I think you're going to see a great game from Robert Lewis. I think Keandre Lambert-Smith's going to show you why he is a quality number 2, similar to Theo Wease up in Columbia. But if you start looking by the time SEC play rolls around, games against Kentucky, games against Oklahoma, games against Texas A&M, Cam Coleman, number 8, is going to be the number 1 target on the field. And I mean for either side. You start looking at the stat lines every single week and go, man, that Coleman kid just Just a different cut of the cloth. He is, and I think that he's going to be for the entire season. Don't even start going and second guessing yourself. Best game of the year? I've been on record for this one. I am excited because I am ready for the SEC to understand what this game means. It's Red River. Red River is a game that just cannot be matched by any means whatsoever. Now, if you are a fan, of course, of Florida or Georgia, they're going to say the world's largest outdoor cocktail party is the greatest rivalry in sports. And more power to you. I get it. If you're a fan of Alabama or Auburn, you'll probably say that the oldest rivalry in the South or the Iron Bowl or the third Saturday in October, that's your rivalry that you hold your heart to. And I get it. I'm not going to shame you. What I am going to say is that this rivalry is not going to play second fiddle to nobody. I tell you what, I hate neutral site games. I always have. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's disgusting when you can have atmospheres like you can in Gainesville or in Athens for those matchups. If you had the game back in Birmingham at Legion Field instead of in Auburn or in Tuscaloosa, I would puke all over the game. I think it would be disgusting. This is the exception. This is the one exception in all of college football that is a cathedral of chaos that is made for one matchup and one matchup alone. And it starts on a Friday night and it carries on over, cascades into the building on an early Saturday morning this year at 2:30, which I think that we all can agree is completely and utterly disrespectful to the tradition. And it floats throughout the day. There is not a single moment where you're sitting there watching the crimson and cream, when you're watching the burnt orange and white go toe-to-toe with each other, and it is a madhouse. There is no love lost in this rivalry. Fans hate each other. Players hate each other. It starts off when you get pregame warmups. You will see people lose their minds before the game even starts. You'll have fights in the middle of the parking lot. There'll be arrests. Cops are everywhere making sure that things don't get too out of control. It is literally Woodstock inside of a football stadium. That is what you get. And for 3 hours, you watch the purity of what college football is and why we fell in love with this game as kids take place. And for 30 of those minutes, you get to stare the enemy in the face and go, what the hell am I doing? And they're going to let you hear it. They 100% are going to let you hear it. That's SEC football. That is what you expect every single time that teams go toe-to-toe with each other. So if you tell me for 1 second that you don't believe that Texas and Oklahoma belong in the SEC and they got to earn their stripes, I will not deny you. If you don't even want to consider this the best rivalry in college football, who am I to judge? Not going to go ahead and judge you. But the best game of the year, Jaxson Arnold versus who I believe is going to be potentially a Heisman Trophy winner in Quinn Ewers, Brent Venables' defense versus Steve Sarkisian's offense, where this might decide a very long, rich history and a new era of the Red River take place in Dallas, Texas, in the Cotton Bowl, the house of what I would call holy football. I don't know what to tell you. This, for me, is the best game of the year. And by the game's end, the final kick, the clock strikes 0, you as an SEC fan will respect this game. Most slept on game. I got one for you. It's week 13, late in the year, right before the holiday weekend. I want to head down to Jordan-Hare Stadium and see what happens when Auburn takes on Texas A&M. Because if I truly believe that these two teams have the right coaches at the helm, and they both come with the same aura. When you think of Auburn football and you think of the way that it needs to be a physical brand of offense, that's what I like about Hugh Freeze. He went out this offseason and he didn't add in a ton of transfers, but the guys that he did bring in were difference makers. Robert Lewis from Georgia State. You also land Keandre Lambert-Smith. Percy Lewis, the offensive tackle from Mississippi State. You still have Jarquez Hunter. You feel good at this point, I think, about your quarterback room. You feel good about the direction of the offense that you're trending in. And I think that the defense will be better because of who you have calling the plays in DJ Durkin. But at the same time, there was not a better hire in terms of aura of school and mentality than what you have in College Station with Mike Elko. Mike Elko is back. There is now a certain brand, a certain yes, sir, no nonsense. I'm not taking your flack for any means whatsoever. If you don't like it, you can go ahead and show your happy ass the door. That's the type of necessary attitude that's needed at a place like Kyle Field. That's the type of attitude that's needed at a program known for its militant background. And now you have these two teams that in about 2 or 3 years may end up being built to compete for a college football playoff. I'm not going to stop you and say that if you say that these two go to the college football playoff next year, they would go deep because if they can. And these are also two fan bases and two boosters with NIL collectives that are willing to open up their wallets to make sure that they're right alongside Alabama, they're right alongside Georgia, they're right alongside Texas, they're right alongside Tennessee, they're right alongside LSU, they're right alongside everyone else in college football so they can be talked about in a prominent light. And I'll tell you what, this might be the start of when we go into 2025, why we see them ranked inside the top 10 of a preseason. Don't look now, but Auburn and Texas A&M, the winner of this game, may be a heavy favorite to win the SEC in 2024. Coach of the year, I have this team beating Georgia. It's the one loss I have for Georgia. If you want to be the best, you got to beat the best. And to me, Lane Kiffin fits that bill. That's just it. It feels like finally all the pieces are in play for Kiffin to claim victory in Oxford. This, I think, is a season to remember down in the Grove. It's one that will be talked about for ages. Everyone on this team will be known as a folklore, but it all starts with the mastermind and the architect, the author of the story. That is Lane Kiffin. He has written a sweet script that I don't even think Hollywood could come up with on certain days. And if you're able to get that win, that massive win against Kirby, offensive mastermind versus defensive guru, both Saban disciples going toe-to-toe for what could be a new era of SEC football with Saban watching from afar. You get that win, how do you not give it to him? And it also shows you one thing, because if everyone's talking about the transfer portal, and there's a lot of arguments going on with Dabo right now, how it's going to look when Mike Norvell takes on Clemson. Well, the gang still belongs, in my opinion, and the title still belongs, a portal king, to Lane Kiffin. And that's not changing anytime soon. So if he wins with a portal class, it does show you that you can portal your way to success. And yeah, you certainly would love to have the foundation built in the recruiting, but it's not a chance to say you can't win without having the right pieces in the portal. How about Heisman of the year? I think the Heisman's coming from the SEC, and I've already made this clear. I think Jaxson Dart masters the offense underneath Lane Kiffin. I think that all the pieces are there. I don't have to wonder what this team is going to look like in terms of what they have. I already know what to expect from a guy like Trey Harris. I know what I'm going to get at the best version of Caden Prescorn. They added in Micah Davis, the Utah State transfer. That's somebody that can be your number 4 receiver, and he maybe only makes 9 or 10 plays per season, but every single one of them is a vertical pass deep downfield, and maybe it comes in one of those primetime games. The one against, I don't know, how about Oklahoma or LSU or Georgia for that matter, or in Atlanta? One of those games is where you have it. And then you still have Jaxson Dart. And this is a guy that goes into his 3rd season where there's nothing left to learn. It's all to master. And this is a dual threat quarterback. I think he's ready to take on that mantle. I think that he's somebody that is not afraid to tuck and run, to fight for those extra yards, to put his team in the best situation possible. And he's not afraid to put his team on his back to deliver. When you see the battle cry, when you want to go follow somebody into war, you need to trust that they are having your best interest in mind. And I'll tell you what, there is not a player that I would trust more to get me those 3 yards, those critical 3 yards, however you see fit, busting his ass, breaking his shoulder, diving for the pylon, taking a concussion, making sure that his team comes out on top than Jaxson Dart this year. And if I get that every single week, I get the version that I think can be pristine, the greatest we have seen, then I think that he comes out and wins the Heisman Trophy. That is what you want for the Heisman Trophy. The player that is willing to do anything and everything possible to put his team ahead of the curve. That is Jaxson Dart going into 2024. And of course, the team to root for just because you want to root for them. I told you guys my fandom can be bought. My fandom can easily be bought. And I think that we all know which way I'm going with this one. It's been a long, hard test. Trust me, it's been very painful for me to decide who am I going with as my favorite. But this fan base has only been kind to me, and who would I be to ignore them? For 2024, my allegiance. Yeah, lied to Mizzou. Missouri, I love you all. Thank you so much for being the kind folks to me. Listen, everyone needs a little bit more Missouri in their life. A team that is willing to put their mouth where the fight is. Their grit and their determination, their physicalness, their ability to show off to everybody. They know that they are a team that belongs in the SEC. And all we've heard for years is that Missouri is the black eye of the conference. They're not Southern enough. Well, you know what? Last year, Eli Drinkwitz showed you he's good enough to win in the SEC. And more importantly, he stands on business. So Missouri, I'm joining your bandwagon this year. You're my team. I am hoping and waiting and seeing you end up come out on top. I am excited to see what the future unfolds and what it looks like at Fairfield Field this year. Como is going to be glorious. And by the way, please bring me. I'll be there every single Saturday if you have me. If you welcome me with open arms the way that I have welcomed you into my heart, I'll tell you what, the Fighting Thompson Tech Red Wolves will embrace you as our personal group. We are excited to join forces with you this year. And you know what? I think most fans of college football that just want to see the SEC little engine that could will easily be siding with me on this one. Missouri Tigers. You have Cole Thompson's Fandom. So those are my superlatives for the 2024 SEC season. Let me know in the comment section down below. Who did I miss on? Who was I too high on? Who was I too low on? Make sure that also you hit subscribe down below. That way you don't miss a single episode of SECU. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. And to keep up with the #1 source for all things SEC, visit SECunfiltered.com. I'm Cole Thompson. We're back in the SEC. Later.